Hello there and welcome to Council of Geeks. My name is Nathaniel Wayne and I'm joined tonight by Ryan Daly. We were going to have Paul too, but he's a bastard, he didn't come. No, he's sick, we hope he gets better. So, you'll notice a different setup. Basically, the green screen has moved to a new permanent home, and I'm not moving it around anymore, but it's in a location where in the summers it's really, really hot and in the winters it's really, really cold. I'm willing to suffer through that. I'm not willing to put guests who come on. So what we're going to talk about on this one is we're basically going to go through the big geeky releases of the summer of 2016. Now for the purposes of this, when I say summer, we're going to start in May. I know technically summer doesn't start till June, but in my mind summer movie season starts in May, which means we will not be talking Batman v Superman or Civil War. We're going to try and avoid the Marvel DC flame war that seems to get worse. Overall thoughts for this summer?
I didn't see a lot, and I'm sure I'm in the majority of that because I think we'll say that most of the summer tentpole blockbuster releases underperformed in terms of their box office.
Yeah, and actually of the list I've compiled of movies to talk about, only one of them did not, at the very least, underperform, if not flat out bomb.
Right.
So we'll start with X-Men Apocalypse, which was a movie that I was disappointed in. I didn't find offensively bad. I came out going, okay, that was a thing. I kind of think less of it every time I think back on it, though. And
I didn't have a lot of good to say about it the first time. My overall take on it was boring. The audience sort of begged Bryan Singer to come back to this property after he had been gone for those two ones in the middle.
Yeah.
So I think Fox was like, as long as Bryan Singer's doing this, we'll be fine. We don't have to pay attention to this. We don't have to, stand over his shoulder and make sure that we don't have to do any quality control. Yeah. And it turns out, maybe you should.
By the time it was over, you're like, has this left us in any place different than where Days of Future Past left us? And ultimately, kind of no, not really.
And I think they made the mistake of thinking that if we make the movie longer, it will feel epic.
Yeah.
And
I felt so bad for Oscar Isaac because he's such a good, and I've even seen him be great in horrible movies. Sure. He was great in Sucker Punch, which is awful, but he's so good in that. But even he couldn't act through that terrible makeup that they put him in, and these horrible generic lines that somebody actually did a comparison, and some of them are word for word lifted from the 90s cartoon. I'm not saying that to knock the 90s cartoon, but you just have different expectations when you watch a cartoon versus go to the movies. So I do want to touch on also possible impact and what's next. And I find it slightly telling that they haven't announced the next X-Men movie in the main franchise. Because, they set up Apocalypse at the end of Days of Future Past and announced it almost immediately.
Right.
Now, obviously, they've still got their third Wolverine.
Yep. Going back earlier in the year, Deadpool was a huge hit for them. So if they're looking at those two things, okay, we're going to make our decision on the future of the X-Men franchise based on this year. Deadpool worked with the audience.
Yeah. So
X-Men didn't.
We already know we're getting Deadpool 2. I don't think it's official, but they've said they're looking into New Mutants.
That was the one I've heard within the last couple of weeks, is that they're still developing that script. And I think that's what they want to do, is some version of either X-Force or New Mutants, or make them different or make them similar. I don't know, but it seems like that's the way to go. And I think they should. I think they should retire the cast of the X-Men movies right now. I don't think Jennifer Lawrence is going to come back unless they pay her a whole lot of money that they don't need to pay her, and I don't think the audience wants her to come back anymore. I'm not as emotionally invested in the Deadpool and X-Force corner of the X-Men property, and because of that, that's actually what I want them to focus on.
They can't let you down.
Exactly.
Next up is one that I actually wanted to see. I didn't get to it. And that was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Out of the Shadows.
Okay.
General consensus was it wasn't objectively good, but it was better than the last one.
If you were a fan of the cartoon from the 90s, the trailer was like, this is a love letter to that.
Yeah, it seemed to have a better handle on being dumb fun because the The first one ended up just being dumb.
Yeah.
And I've gone on record various places saying that dumb fun is actually really hard to do correctly, because usually you just end up with something insulting.
Right.
It made about half as much money.
That speaks to an error in judgment on the studio's part of pushing this thing when the first one, I don't know what the box office was for the first one.
It did decent money. It did pretty well, but this is sort of where I think executives have a tendency to look at the box office and nothing else. They look at that one, that made money, let's make another.
Right.
And they don't get a gauge on what people actually thought of it. Right. So yes, lots of people came out to see it.
None of them liked it.
Even a franchise that isn't working, I always kind of feel bad when a franchise dies, because in my mind, like, it lost its chance to turn it around. And I kind of love an underdog story. And it's never too late to stop sucking.
And I think we would both love to see a good Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle story.
Yes!
We're fans of that property.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, I think that's probably the nail in the coffin for that, because of the way they chose to do it, i.e. how CGI heavy it is, I don't really know if there's a way to cut the budget.
I mean, if I'm a microcosm for the general audience, that's why. Even somebody who's predisposed to liking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles said, no, that's not something that interests me.
Yeah.
So.
Warcraft.
Didn't see it.
Me neither. I did actually want to, and this was even after I heard it was supposed to be a hot mess. But I still wanted to see it because I wanted to validate the stance that I have chosen to take, that you can't make a good movie out of a video game, which is an argument I've had with Paul already. It might get a sequel.
Is that because of its foreign performance?
Yes, but there's an extra wrinkle here.
Okay.
It might get a sequel. It might be heavily financed with Chinese money.
Okay.
And it may not get a US theatrical release.
Okay.
Because it made so little money in the US that the movie would have been more profitable if they just scrapped the US distribution and just let it be primarily a Chinese but an international film.
That's what I wish they would do with the Transformers franchise. Because the fourth Transformers movie, which I did not see, was the lowest performing domestically, at the domestic box office. But it made $1 billion overseas. $1 billion just overseas. And it was the lowest performing domestically. So
it was.
US audiences have said, Michael Bay, we're done with your version of Transformers.
Let's be fair, it still made like $250 million.
Yeah.
Warcraft made like 30 in the US.
Bucks. 30 total. $30.
Yeah, $30.
It sold 5 tickets.
That was
matinee shows.
So and that does, and I mean, I know you don't care because again, you're not a gamer, but it does kind of hinge. It puts a lot of weight on the shoulders of Assassin's Creed.
I think there already was a lot.
There already was a lot, but this puts more. Because at this point, I mean, because Angry Birds is getting a sequel, which I figured it would. Angry Birds was fine. I took my daughter to it. She had fun. It was not that bad, but it's going to be a weird world where people are forced to hold up the Resident Evil franchise and Angry Birds as the pinnacles of this is as good as it's going to get for video game movies. But it will work out well for me because it fuels my argument that you can't make a good movie out of a video game, and I will stand by that until proven wrong. And honestly, I'd be happy to be proven wrong. I don't think I'm going to be. Not for a very long time. Another one that I think we both missed, Independence Day Resurgence.
Yes, and this is why we needed Paul here for this run.
Paul actually saw this!
And I'm pretty convinced that he went into the wrong theater.
What else was playing that weekend? What might he have gone to?
I don't know. I saw the original Independence Day during the intervening 20 years.
Yeah.
Nothing made me think, oh man, I really want to see more in that world.
I mean, not only Too Little Too Late.
Yeah.
But missing the star that everyone remembers. Let's be honest, that was the movie that sent Will Smith into the stratosphere, and if there was anyone in that movie you were going to say, I want to see them again in this.
Because Randy Quaid's character died, right?
He died.
So yeah. The ships were bigger.
Okay. Here's something that I looked up. You know how in the original they kind of went sort of purposefully, and I would say successfully, generic with the aliens. It felt like it wasn't ripping off anything because it was ripping off everything.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they went more specific with their ripping off this time because there's an alien queen who is significantly bigger than all the other aliens.
They were ripping off E.T.
Yes. And it sets up a sequel.
Oh.
Like, not hints at, but very blatantly sets up, because apparently there's some third faction, there's some other race of benevolent aliens that, like, after the queen gets killed at the end, but the mothership is still alive and that goes away, then the benevolent aliens are like, come with us into space so we can end this fight.
All right, well, maybe when I'm 55, that'll be appealing to me.
I don't think that's going to happen, because this one did not do particularly well.
That was going to be my question.
Domestically, internationally, it did not make enough. It couldn't even justify, like, the way Warcraft could, where it was like, oh, but it was this much. It made more internationally, but that's simply because there were more theaters for it to play in than there were domestically.
Okay.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
So, it was fine.
It was. It was fine, which I think is sort of the problem, because the people who prejudged it and pre-hated it were disappointed that it wasn't as bad as they wanted to.
Yeah.
And the people who immediately rushed to its defense and said, no, you're all wrong, this is a really great thing, were kind of overselling it, because it wasn't that good. I enjoyed it. I had a good time watching it, but as I was watching it, there kept being these things that would just kind of take me out of it and just say, it could have been better if they hadn't done that. Most of those were the cameos by the original performers. I think every time I saw Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd or Sigourney Weaver, I was like,
The dead cast member had the most dignified cameo.
Oh, jeez.
So that should tell you everything.
Yeah. I wanted it to be successful. I wanted it to make its money, because I thought if they can get a sequel, most of these problems can be corrected, and they can push this somewhere where I would like to follow and like to see it go. So I was hoping that it would get a sequel, but
it's not looking good.
They can look at it as a loss leader and say, you know what, we believe in this. We think it could do better on a second run if we tweak these things. They might bite the bullet and say, we believe in this, the power of this franchise. We might retool it a little bit, but we want to make another one in 3 years. They could do that.
I wanted this to be better. And I've seen a lot of people, online and in certain circles that I operate in, who have been, look, this is a movie about 4 women, and none of them are in an active relationship with a man, and when they're talking with each other, it's never about men. It's like, and all these things, and like they're just hanging out, and and it's a business, and they're making their own way. And I look at that and go, that's all great, but I wish we could have had a better movie that did all that. Those positive things, which I'm all in favor of, don't make it a better story, don't make it a better narrative, don't make it better characters. And it reminds me of people who defend the Transformers movies by going, look, it's huge giant robots smashing each other on the screen. Why isn't that awesome? I'm like, yes, but this is a lousy version of that inherently awesome thing.
Right.
Now, Ghostbusters is better than the Transformers movies, but I feel that same way when I get into discussions of its actual quality with people.
How much credit can you give it just for being a positive feminist movie? Like, is that...
I'll give it all the credit it deserves, but I'm not going to overlook story problems because of that.
Does it get a free pass?
No.
Because it does things that, by this, we really should come to expect that in movies. It shouldn't be a big deal that we can get a movie about 4 strong women in this kind of position.
I agree with that.
But the nature is that is sort of a revolutionary concept in movies right now. Does this put more pressure on Wonder Woman? I mean, was the pressure already built on based on the DC movie?
There's 3 movies that, as each of these things fails, there's 3 movies right now that are carrying a lot of weight as far as whether we will continue to see female-led tentpoles, and that is Wonder Woman, Ghost in the Shell, and Captain Marvel.
No.
And for each one of those that sinks, it's going to increase the pressure on whichever ones are left, which is not fair and it's stupid, but it's
because the pressure should already be on those movies just to be good quality movies. It feels so weird for me to for this position, because I grew up watching the Terminator and Alien movies, which had these female action heroes. So to be 10, 15, 20 years later, it's like, why is this a hard pill to swallow? Like, why is this...
I don't know.
So, Star Trek? Was that the next
Yes, Star Trek Beyond, which I enjoyed, I didn't love, and has underperformed compared to the previous one. That said, I've seen a lot, and I've heard a lot from a lot of people who are bigger fans of Star Trek as a franchise than I am, who really loved it. And I understand why, because it's evocative of an actual episode of the classic series. But a lot of it just didn't quite come together for me. The villain I like the idea of, but he didn't quite work for me. I feel like we're missing a middle movie, as the opening narration established that Captain Kirk is burning out on his 5-year deep space mission. But this is the first movie we've seen him on the 5-year deep space mission. Can we have one movie where he's having fun doing the thing that he spent 2 movies being excited about doing? We have to jump right to he's jaded about it already?
And that was one of the complaints that I heard, that Into Darkness was a horrible middle chapter for these 3 movies, or that this one should have been the sequel to the 2009 Trek.
In terms of a franchise, now I like Into Darkness actually a lot better than many people seem to. But if we're looking at overall franchise, if you're going to remove one, that's the one you should remove.
I kind of felt the same way. I was like, I liked it, I didn't love it. There were things that I could see where the great movie was in this, but they made a few missteps. There were things that didn't connect with me. The villain, that entire plot, there were a lot of elements that just weren't catching. However, it was a movie where after I saw it, the more I thought about it, the more I kind of found myself liking things and liking the feeling that the movie gave me. And it was one that I wish I had seen a second time. If I had had more time or the opportunity, I would have liked to go back and see that a second time in the theater. It was one that felt very much like an old Star Trek episode. It had that great spirit, that sense of fun. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the audience that would have responded to this movie didn't go see it because they were
based on the other 2 movies, they thought they were never going to get this.
Right, I've heard from fans. I've talked to Star Trek fans who just said, "No, I'm not going to see it." And it was because they didn't like the previous movie. Like they especially didn't like Into Darkness. Some of them didn't like the 09 Trek as much. They just didn't feel like this one connects. And I think that's unfortunate. And I wonder if some of that is in the marketing, because the comparison I would make would be look at the most recent Star Wars movie, which, and the one that's coming out too. Everything about the marketing of that is like, look how much it looks like the old ones from the 70s and 80s. So all of the fans who were burned out by the prequels in the 90s and early 2000s, who's like, I'm never going to watch another Star Wars movie again. They see that, they're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. You're really making it look like it. Whereas the new Star Trek felt like an episode of the original series. But if you just looked at the trailer, and we talked about it, the trailer, it was all the Beastie Boys song, it was all rock and roll, fast motorcycles, and it was like, okay, it looks like a J.J. Abrams music video. This doesn't look like old Trek. So
there was a disconnect between the film that they delivered and the marketing, and I have a feeling maybe what happened was they made a movie that would be more appealing to the old fans, and then marketing took those old fans for granted. I'm not going to say the movie did, but I have a feeling that maybe the marketing arm went...
Just assumed that the fans would go anyway.
They'll come no matter what. Let's get the young, hip, Fast and Furious crowd in. Not realizing that the people that the movie had been made to appeal more to saw that and went, forget it.
Right.
Last one, Suicide Squad. I liked it more than Batman v Superman, if only for sense of fun. I think from a technical storytelling level, it is just as much of a mess as Batman v Superman was.
Without hyperbole, I liked Root Canal better than Batman vs. Superman. So I went in there expecting it to be a bad, messy movie. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it. The one character that I thought, I was like, okay, I buy her because she's at least being faithful, is Amanda Waller. And then Amanda Waller has this turn in the middle of the movie where she executes 4 people.
Yeah, that.
I was like, wait a minute. That Amanda Waller doesn't she's not a killer who's like just going to murder people to protect her own ass. That's not who she is.
No.
Everybody was like, oh, the first half hour is great, the way it introduces characters. I felt like we got 3 introductions for all of the primary characters in the span of like 20 minutes. It kept on introducing us.
The Assault on Arkham animated movie did effectively the same intro bits for every character, did the whole thing in 5 minutes and did it better.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very fundamental things that you just would have gone, well, just put that, because like, think about it. Captain Boomerang throws, to my memory, 2 boomerangs.
Right.
Neither of which do much of anything. Deadshot shoots a lot of people, but does not do a single trick impossible shot. Not once.
One when he's taking out like the gangster, but it's even that is not really impressive.
No.
Where he does like ricochet shot.
No.
It's nothing special.
He doesn't do any amazing, oh my god, kind of shots.
Right.
Katana has a sword that sucks souls, and we do not see it suck a single soul.
I think you could take her out of the movie and nothing changes.
You could take a whole lot.
You could take Croc out of the movie and nothing changes.
You could take the Joker out of the movie and nothing changes.
I wish you had.
So, well, let's actually talk about that Joker for a minute. Now, a lot of people have ripped on it. I actually can't make a call on the character and the performance because the character was so poorly integrated and so superfluous to everything going on that I actually don't think it matters how good or bad the performance was. It was never going to work. I kind of want him to get a chance to do it again because I want to see him where he actually matters to the story and it makes sense that he's there and the character is used well so that I can actually judge the performance, because otherwise I feel like it's unfair. I feel like all the effort, certainly all the press, went around the characterization of the Joker and the way he lost himself in playing it and the quirks and the tattoos and the whatever. But almost no thought was put into why is he actually here from a narrative perspective? Sure. Why is he important? I feel like nobody thought about that at all. I think ultimately how little time they gave him to write the thing is what kills it more than anything else, because
I think that's part of it. I also think how little they gave him the movie in post-production.
Yes, well
that's the other big deal.
That's something I was going to come back to, because it's obviously you can tell it's been reconfigured in the editing room, because they make you can tell that it's supposed to be a reveal that Flag was sleeping with the Enchantress.
Right.
But we know that within 5 minutes of the movie starting.
Right.
And that's obviously just all been rejiggered, because the way it's presented, we obviously weren't supposed to know that.
Yeah.
As far as how the script was written.
Right.
But I had this general thought overall, and I said I was going to try and avoid Marvel versus DC, but I'm going to poke the bear now. What it feels like is both Marvel and DC have the ways that they want to control the product. Mm-hmm. I think the difference is Marvel does it on the front end, DC does it on the back end. And by that I mean Marvel, when they are lining up the talent in the first place, go, these are the things we need this to be. Right. Are you okay with that? Right. And that's why we lost, say, Edgar Wright, but we lost him before the movie started shooting. So that they could and that's why Ant-Man, while I feel it's a lesser Marvel movie, didn't completely fall down on its face, because the person who they got to actually make it was on the same page as them. What I feel like DC does is they bring in talent, and this certainly felt like the case with Batman v Superman and now Suicide Squad. It feels like they brought in talent, gave them maybe a time frame, and said, do whatever you want, but then try to force it to be what they want it to be in the editing room, as opposed to doing all that kind of control at the front end and then just letting the movie happen.
Since the end of Phase 1, most of the directors that Marvel has gotten have come out of TV. Yeah. These are journeyman directors who are used to working in these type of constraints within this sandbox. Okay, they're here for this chapter, they do this, they're on this type of thing, and they're just plugging in part of a whole picture. They understand that, they know how to work with that, and that helps the thing feel more or less seamless across 13 movies now. Yeah. Whereas DC is looking for visionary directors who have these accomplished things. They make war movies and these epic sagas and all these things like that. but then they freak out when the reviews come in for the last movie and they overreact to certain things, and they're like, no. The audience didn't like the last movie, so we have to do this to this one.
Before someone accused me of being a Marvel fanboy and being in Disney's pocket, I wish. Disney, if you want to actually pay me for my opinion, I would happily cash that check. But just to make the point that that's not what I'm doing, what Disney does will absolutely give you a more homogenized product.
Right.
And what DC does could potentially get you a more out-of-the-box, we never expected that product, but it hasn't, and when that process fails, it fails much harder.
Right.
Because when a Marvel movie fails, you get Iron Man 2. I didn't love it, but I can't hate it either. I can't get worked up about it, and that's about as bad as you get out of Marvel's process. DC, when it goes bad, it goes much worse. Now, potentially, with DC's process, you could theoretically get something better and more visionary, more original than anything Marvel has or possibly ever could put out. But it hasn't happened yet. I mean, arguably it happened with Nolan, but
I would still say I like The Dark Knight better than any of the Marvel movies that I've seen.
And I'll give you that.
Jumping back to Suicide, because this was a major point, this was the one that has actually done well at the box office.
Yes, it has.
Despite pretty, again, universal negative critical reviews.
Yes.
Much in the same way Batman vs. Superman had negative critical responses before the movie came out. Suicide Squad had just a slew of bad press before the movie came out. Doesn't seem to have mattered much.
And honestly, I chalk that up to the one thing that I say it has over Batman v Superman, which is fun. I think that if a movie is fun, maybe not critics, but audiences can be much more forgiving. That didn't save Batman v Superman because it was so dour and so self-serious that when you fail to deliver something coherent and there's no sense of fun, then
nobody goes back a second time.
Yeah.
Possible that we're thinking about this more than we should be?
No.
What? Sorry, that's crazy talk.
No, that's insane.
Sorry, I had a weird thought there.
It's almost as if you stated the entire premise of this YouTube channel and podcast feed, but no. We don't get that meta.
Sorry.
So I guess that about wraps up summer of 2016. So I guess we will wrap it up on that note. Ryan, do you have anything you feel like plugging? You've got so many things, but I know some of them are ending. And
I am the host of the Secret Origins podcast, which reviews the Secret Origins comics published by DC in the 80s. September and October, the last 4 episodes of that show. We're ramping up to a massive, huge conclusion. It's going to be really exciting. Got a lot of great guests. You're not one of them, so sorry. A lot of guests that I could afford.
Your last check bounced.
Anywho, also got a few other podcasts on the Fire and Water Network. Give Me Those Star Wars, which talks about Star Wars franchise, and Power of Fishnets, the Black Canary and Zatanna podcast.
So, what were your thoughts on the summer of 2016 geeky movies? Did you like them? Did you see some of the ones we didn't and are shaking your fist going, you would have liked it if you'd seen it? Or were you as done with it by the end as we were? Whatever your thoughts were, go ahead and drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe. You can listen to the Council of Geeks podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. You can follow me on Twitter at Council of Geeks. And until next time, this council is adjourned. I think you're ringing.
Do you want to redo that?